ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله.
So before we begin, just to let the brothers and sisters know, if you want the English translation of this, you can find this on our blog at MTWS Post Haven. And tomorrow the class will be at 8:15 based upon daylight savings times. So, this book which we're covering tonight is a great classic book. And this book is the explanation of al-Mustaqni. And this book we're reading is explained by Shaykh Uthaymeen. The original book that he's explaining was authored by al-Hajjawi, who died 968 years after the Hijrah. His book was an explanation of a book, al-Mustaqni by Ibn Qudama. So we're reading an explanation of an explanation, all right? And this is the book of fasting. And this book is based on Hanbali fiqh. But Shaykh Uthaymeen brings the different opinions. So for many of these issues here, you're going to get two opinions. The opinion of the author, who is a Hanbali scholar, and then Shaykh Uthaymeen is going to bring you what he believes is most correct. And he's going to bring you some other statements from other schools of thought. Okay? So he begins by saying, as-sawm, fasting in the Arabic language is a masdar. It's a verbal noun from the Arabic verb, sawma yasumu. Now, and the linguistic meaning is al-imsak. It is to refrain, to hold back from something. As for the religious meaning, fasting is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal by refraining from food, drink, and everything that invalidates the fast from the entrance of Fajr until sunset. Now keep in mind that it's not like many of the non-Muslims when they describe fasting, they say what? Sun up to sundown. That's incorrect. It begins at the entrance of Fajr. When Fajr comes in, that's when the fast starts and it goes to sunset. So he goes into his ruling. Now, he said, وَيَلْزُمْ الصَّوْمِ لِكُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ مُكَلِّفٍ قَادِرٍ. And fasting is obligatory upon every Muslim who is religiously responsible and has the ability to fast. So here he mentions three conditions for fasting. The person has to be Muslim, they have to be religiously responsible, and he's going to explain that, and they have to have the ability to fast. He said, so the first one, Muslim. He said the disbeliever is not commanded to fast, and his fast is not accepted while he is in a state of disbelief. This means we do not tell the non-Muslim it is obligatory upon him to fast. And if they embrace Islam, we do not tell them to make up the days of fasting they missed while they were disbelievers. He said now, so we have two things here, right? We don't command the non-Muslims to fast, and if they embrace Islam, we don't tell them to make the days up that they missed when they were kuffar. He said, now as for the proof that the fast of the non-Muslim is not accepted, is a statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَمَا مَنَعَهُمْ أَن تُقْبَلَ مِنْهُمْ نَفَقَاتُهُمْ إِلَّا أَنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَبِرُسُولِهِ. And nothing prevents their contributions from being accepted except that they disbelieved in Allah and His Messenger. Surah Tawbah, verse number 54. He said, therefore, if the charity of the disbeliever is not accepted due to their disbelief, then no doubt their acts of worship are not accepted. Okay, so the fasting of the disbeliever is not accepted. Now the proof that we do not tell the new Muslim, right? A person becomes a Muslim halfway during Ramadan. You don't say, okay, you missed 15 days. So you got to make those up, right? The proof that we do not tell them this is a statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, قُلِ الَّذِينَ كَفُرُوا إِن يَنْتَهُوا يُغْفَرْ لَهُم مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ. Say to those who have disbelieved, if they cease from their disbelief, their past will be forgiven. Surah number 8, verse 38. And we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never ordered the new Muslim to make up their acts of worship they missed while they were disbelievers. Okay, that's clear, right? But there's another issue. Will the disbeliever be taken into account for not fasting Ramadan? Right? This is important to know, right? All the Muslims around the world, we have to fast. So is the non-Muslim who's not fasting, is he getting over? The Shaykh, he asked a question. He said, will the disbeliever be taken into account in the hereafter for not fasting the month of Ramadan? He says, al-jawab, na'am. The answer is yes. In the hereafter, they will be taken into account for each religious obligation they missed. He said, if the Muslim who is obedient to Allah, adhering to his laws and regulations, will be taken into account, then no doubt the arrogant individual will surely be taken into account. Listen to this. He said the disbeliever will be taken into account for the favors of Allah they enjoyed. He's going to take them into account for the food they ate, the drinks they had, and the clothing. Every favor he gave them, he's going to take them into account for that. He said they shall all be taken to, they shall also be taken into account for every impermissible act they committed and the religious obligations they failed to implement. Allah Azza wa Jalla informed us that the inhabitants of paradise, may Allah Ta'ala make us and you from them, will have a conversation with the inhabitants of the hellfire. They're going to have a conversation. مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرَ? What caused you to enter the pit of fire? قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. They will say, we were not of those who prayed. وَلَمْ نَكُنْ نُطْعِمُ الْمِسْكِينَ. And we did not feed the poor. وَكُنَّا نُخُوضُ مَعَ الْخَائِضِينَ. And we used to engage in vain discourse with those who engaged in it. وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And we used to deny the day of recompense. Right? Now the Shaykh says, so, but what if someone says that the kuffar are going to the hellfire because they disbelieve in the day of judgment? And that's the only reason. Because they were kuffar. The Shaykh, he said, no. We respond by saying, here there are 4 things mentioned in this verse. And if they were not going to be punished for all 4, there would have been no benefit in mentioning them. Right? There's no ayat that's mentioned that doesn't have a purpose, right? He said, so here, he mentions they shall be punished, the kuffar, for not praying, not paying zakat, mocking the verses of Allah Ta'ala, and not believing in the day of judgment, right? And there's a benefit in this, right? We tell our youth, and we remind ourselves first and foremost, yes, we are waking up in the morning to pray. We're praying, but don't think because the non-Muslim are praying, they're getting over. There is absolutely no get over in life. Everybody was given the same command, right? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I did not create mankind or jinn except to worship me. This applies to every single man and jinn on the earth. Iblis and everybody else, right? They have to be Muslim or they're going to be in trouble. Now, he said, therefore, the disbeliever is not commanded to fast. And if he fasts while in a state of disbelief, his fast will not be accepted, but he will be taken into account for not fasting in the hereafter. So that's one about being a Muslim. Number 2, they must be religiously responsible. He said, when you see this word, mukallaf, right? Religiously responsible. In the speech of the fuqaha, the jurists, it means 2 things, right? Those who have reached the age of puberty and those who have a sound mind and intellect. So if a young man or woman reach the age of puberty and they have a sound mind and intellect, they are mukallaf. They are religiously responsible. Now the pen is writing upon them. All right? Now, number 3 is what? Qadir, having the ability to fast. So this excludes those who are unable to fast, right? So the 3 things are what? The person has to be Muslim, they have to be mukallaf, religiously responsible, and they have to have the ability to fast. So this excludes those who are unable to fast. He said, now those who are unable to fast, they are of 2 categories. Number 1, those who have the unforeseen or temporary illnesses. And number 2, those who have the perpetual illnesses. Okay? As for the temporary illness, and what's an example of this?
Cold.
The cold, the flu, something like that, right? Allah Ta'ala mentions them in this verse, وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخْرَى. And whoever is ill or on a journey, then an equal number of other days to be made up. Surah Baqarah, verse number 185. Right? So that's the first category. Somebody who has an unforeseen illness or temporary illness, right? The second one is the perpetual illness. And that is the illness that a person does not anticipate being cured from. It's an illness that he doesn't think he's going to recover from, that prevents him from fasting. In the mission of verse, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ الْمِسْكِينِ. And upon those who are unable to fast, they have to give a ransom of feeding a poor person. This is Surah Baqarah 184, right? So two types again, the temporary illness and that which is known as the, for lack of a better word, the permanent illness that you don't anticipate being cured from, okay? 9. He said, so the last verse we mentioned, this refers to a person that has a debilitating condition, which they do not anticipate it ending. This person should feed a poor person for each day of fasting. Right? Now we're going to discuss how to feed the poor. There are two methods in which the elderly or sick person that has a perpetual illness preventing them from fasting can feed the poor. Two ways, right? Number one, they can prepare cooked food and invite the poor to eat daily after the fast. This was the practice of Anas ibn Malik anhu, when he became elderly, right? He lived very old, and when he was unable to fast, he would feed the people. So, number one is how? To prepare cooked food and invite the poor to eat with you. Number two, they can give the poor uncooked food for each day of fasting. And now the Shaykh gets a little more detail. And of course, this is the word Shaykh Uthaymeen. He says, for example, they can give wheat in the amount of a mud, which is equivalent to 650 grams or 1.4 pounds roughly, right? So, for example, if they give them wheat, they give them 1.4 pounds of wheat, okay? Or they can give half a sa'a, which is equivalent to 2.8 pounds of another type of food. So, for example, if you give 5 mud, right, then this is going to cover 5 days of fasting for 5 people. That's clear? Okay? Now, the Sheikh says, but if you're giving people uncooked food, it's good etiquette to give them something to go along with it. Slap a little meat in there. You know, some kind of things to go along with the uncooked food, and this will be more complete and better. Okay? Now, this is a footnote that I wanted to mention, which is very important. It's about using community iftars to feed the people for those who cannot fast. Okay? So, during Ramadan in 1429, which is about 14 years ago, I called Sheikh Khalid al-Radadi to ask him this question, right? About our Muslim family here who are not able to fast and they feed the poor. So I said, oh Sheikh, we have those who are not able to fast due to illness. And this is at the advice of a doctor. And they know it is obligatory upon them to feed the poor for every day they missed. But they believe that they can gather the Muslims at the masjid for an iftar, and that this will fulfill the obligation of feeding the poor. Is this correct? The Sheikh said, no, this is not correct. And this is not considered feeding the poor. He said, rather they should feed the poor by giving them the prescribed amount of food. He said 1 handful of a normal-sized man for each day they did not fast. And if they want to invite the poor Muslims to the masjid to feed them, this is okay. Right? And I said, oh Sheikh, what if people fed like this in the past? What should they do? He said they should perform this act again in the correct manner, and this remains a debt that they have upon them until they do it correctly. Okay? Now, can somebody tell me one reason why gathering all the Muslims for community iftar and feeding like this is incorrect?
May not be poor.
Everybody there is not poor, right? Everybody there is not poor, and you have to feed the poor. If you do community iftar, somebody there is going to be rich, okay? The next subject, the time for feeding the poor. He says, now the person has a choice. He can either feed the poor daily, or he can wait to feed them all on the final day of Ramadan. And this was the action of Anas ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with him. He said, so the person is able to, now this is a question, right? is the person able to feed the poor prior to the day, right? So what does that mean, right? So if we are on day number 5 of Ramadan, right? And the person says, well, you know, I'm going to feed 10 people. Is he able to do that? And we're on day number 5 of Ramadan?
No.
He can't do that, right? He can't do that, right? So the Shaykh, he says, no. He says feeding the poor early is the same as fasting early. He said, so if you fast the month of Ramadan during the month of Sha'ban, will it be accepted? He said, no. He said, therefore, do not feed the poor early. Either feed them daily after that fast has gone by, or wait to the end of Ramadan. So if this, for example, after the first day of Ramadan, then you can feed a person for that day, and so forth and so on. But you can't feed them until you have fasted that day. You cannot feed anybody for that day. Clear? Now, next topic. Is it better for the sick person to fast or to break their fast? Now, the Shaykh said it is better for the Muslim to do that which is easiest. But if fasting will be harmful to them, then it is haram. It is impermissible for them to fast. Now here comes the question, right? If someone were to ask, what is the level of harm that should prevent you from fasting? The Shaykh says, we say the level of harm can be known by 2 things, right? Like, when do you know if you're too sick to fast? Either by physical perception or by information, right? This is how you can know. Either by physical perception or information. He says, as for physical perception, this is when the sick person feels within himself that fasting is harming him, agitating his hunger, and delaying his recovery. Right? As for the information, this is when a reliable doctor informs him that fasting will be harmful to him. The Shaykh says, now, if a commoner who is not a doctor tells you that it's going to harm you, then you don't take his statement. Likewise, if a doctor who is unreliable tells you that, then you don't take his statement. Now, here comes another question. Does the doctor who tells you as a Muslim that you should not fast, does he have to be a Muslim also? This is another question. The Shaykh, he says, and he also makes another example. He said, what if a doctor tells you that you should not pray standing up, and he's a kafir? Do you listen to him? The Shaykh says, is it a condition that the doctor who informs him that fast will harm him, that he has been Muslim? He said, no, this is not a condition. He said, once the doctor is deemed reliable, we can accept his statement if he tells us that fasting will be harmful to us. Right? And what's the proof of that? That a kafir says fasting is going to harm you. You say, okay, I'm going to trust you. He said the Prophet ﷺ, he trusted the word of a disbeliever in a situation that was greater and more dangerous than this. He trusted the word of a disbeliever when he migrated from Mecca to Medina. He said he hired a pagan named Abdullah ibn Urayqah to show them the road to Medina. Now, why was it so dangerous? Because the tribe of Quraysh were looking for the Prophet ﷺ, and they had placed a bounty of 100 camels on his head. And they had placed a bounty of 100 camels on the head of who? Abu Bakr. So you got 200 camels. Now, so this kafir could have said, I'm about to get 200 camels. He could have set them up. But the Prophet ﷺ, he trusted him to show him the way, and he showed him the way. He said, so this proves that we can trust the word of a pagan or a disbeliever if we can take that word if we deem them to be trustworthy. Okay? The next subject, is it better for the traveler to break his fast or to fast? He said, according to the Hanbali school of thought, it is better not to fast. Rather, the Hanbali school of thought, they see it as hated for the traveler to fast. The Shafi'i school of thought believe it is better to fast. So you have 2 opinions, right? Hanbali say it's hated. Shafi'i say it's recommended to fast. He said the correct viewpoint is detailed. This is Shaykh Uthaymeen saying. He said, if fasting and not fasting are equal in relation to the traveler, then it's better to do what? To fast. If fasting will be difficult upon the traveler, it's better not to fast. He said, and the proof is, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on a journey and he did not break his fast until it was said to him, this fast is becoming difficult upon the people, and they are waiting to see what you're going to do. So he called for a bowl of water after the Asr prayer, and he drank the water while the people were looking at him. He stood up on something and held the bowl of water up and let everybody see him drink the water, right? And what did they do? They drank the water, right? It was said to him, some people are still fasting. He said, they are disobedient, they are disobedient. This hadith has been collected in the Muslim. And he said they were disobedient because they were fasting while traveling, although it was difficult upon them. Because the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salam, said, Laysa min al-bir as-sum fi safar. He said, it is not from piety to fast while you are traveling. Now, the Hanbali school of thought, they take this hadith we just mentioned to show that fasting while traveling is hated. But he said, no, this statement is not general for everyone. This statement was specific for this man because during the same hadith, a man fainted. A man fainted. So he's saying it's not pious to fast while you're traveling. You're passing out. Now, next topic. All right? He said, if evidence is established during the day that the new moon has been sighted, it is obligatory to refrain from eating and make the day up. Right? Explanation. He says, for example, if someone living in a faraway country sighted the moon for Ramadan, and they went to a judge and testified to seeing it, then it is obligatory upon the people to refrain from eating and make the day up. He says, as for refraining from eating the remainder of the day, there is no doubt about this, and I do not know of any ikhtilaf, any difference of opinion concerning this matter. As for making the day up, then it is mandatory. Why is that? Because it is from the conditions of the obligatory fast to make the intention prior to Fajr. Right? Now he's going to mention a very important point here, right? Now, before the point, he said, Ibn Taymiyyah was of the opinion that the person, like, if for example, if you're in the middle of the day and somebody says the moon was sighted, most of the scholars say that you have to stop eating and make that day up. He said, Ibn Taymiyyah said that you don't have to make the day up, but you have to stop eating the rest of the day. The Shaykh, he says, we say that the person making the day up and removing the blame from himself is better than following the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah, although his statement is strong. But meaning he has a strong statement, but it's better to do what the majority say in this situation because their statement is stronger. Likewise, the woman who becomes pure from menses and post-childbirth bleeding during the daylight of Ramadan and the traveler returning from a journey. Okay, so he says, right? If a woman becomes pure from menses or post-childbirth bleeding during the daylight of Ramadan, the author says there are two things she must do. What are those things? Anybody know?
Refrain from eating.
Refrain from eating and do what? Make the day up. This is the view of the author. The second viewpoint is that it is not upon the woman who becomes pure from menses and post-childbirth bleeding during the daylight of Ramadan to refrain from eating for the remainder of the day. The other opinion is that she can keep on eating because it was permissible for her to eat when the day started. And the Shaykh says, and this is the correct opinion. So she only has to make the day up. So if a woman is on her menses and she becomes clean and the day is still daylight, Shaykh Uthaymeen says what's correct is that she can keep on eating because she was eating when the day started, but she has to make the day up. Okay? He said, as for the traveler who is returning to his land and he ate while he was on a journey, then he returns to his land, it's obligatory upon him to stop eating and make the day up. This is another opinion, right? He says, but the second opinion is that it's not upon him to stop eating because he was eating when the day started and he only has to make the day up. And he says, and this is the most correct opinion, right? So the traveler, he only has to make the day up according to Shaykh Uthaymeen. He says, so there are three situations for the traveler. Number one, if there is no difference between him fasting or not fasting, in this case, it is better to fast. And this is the opinion of Imam Shafi'i. Number two, if breaking his fast is easy for him, then it's better to break his fast, meaning this is going to be easier. Number 3, if fasting will be a severe hardship upon him that he cannot endure, in this case, it's haram for him to fast. Okay? Okay, we'll go over this next one. The pregnant and nursing woman. Okay? He said, if a pregnant or nursing woman breaks her fast, fearing for herself, then she only must, If the pregnant or nursing woman breaks her fast, only because she fears for her own health, then she has to make the day up. If she breaks the fast, fearing for her child, then she must make the day up and feed a poor person for each day she missed. Okay? The Shaykh explains. He says, so the author, he says it's permissible for the pregnant and nursing woman to break her fast, even if she is not sick. She can still break her fast. This is because it is difficult for the pregnant woman to fast due to her pregnancy. And likewise, her fasting could affect the growth of her child. Also, the woman who is nursing can break her fast because fasting will decrease her milk and her child will be harmed by this. For this reason, it's from the mercy of Allah Ta'ala that He allows them to break the fast and they have to make the day up. He says, now as for the pregnant or nursing woman feeding the poor, there are 3 scenarios. Number 1, if the pregnant or nursing woman breaks her fast only fearing for herself, then she only makes the day up and she doesn't do anything else, right? So if she's pregnant or nursing and she breaks her fast fearing for her own health, she only makes the day up. If the pregnant or nursing woman breaks her fast fearing for her child, then she makes the day up and feeds a poor person for each day she missed. He said, now it's clear that she makes the day up because she broke her fast. But why does she feed a person? She feeds someone because she broke her fast for someone else. Okay? You with me? Now the Shaykh says, if she breaks her fast, fearing for herself and her child, the author was silent about that. And there's a benefit in this right here, right? Sometimes it's better to be silent. And you find that Shabi, he said, La adli nisful ilm. He said, saying I don't know is half of knowledge. Right? Now, Shaykh Uthaymeen, he says, my view is that it is most correct that the pregnant or nursing woman only has to make the day up without feeding the poor person. Right? So he's of the opinion that if that the pregnant or nursing woman, regardless of why she breaks her fast, she only has to make the day up. He says this is because she is similar to the sick person or the traveler. And what does the sick person or traveler have to do? Only make the day up, right? Now, we'll read this last thing, inshallah. Insanity, sleep, or going unconscious, right? So, whoever intends to fast, then wa'iyadu billah, goes insane or faints for the entirety of the day and does not awake for any portion of the day, his fast is not valid. Now, this does not apply to the person who sleeps the entire day. And the person who goes unconscious must make the day up. He's going to explain. He says, so these 3 things are similar, but the ruling is completely different. First one is insanity. If a person goes insane before Fajr, and he remains insane until sunset, his fast is not valid. Does he have to make it up? Nope, he does not have to make it up. This is because during the time of fast, he was insane and he was not from those who had to fast. Why? Because the person has to have an intellect. So he didn't have an intellect during this time, so fasting is not upon him. Number 2, unconscious. If a person goes unconscious for the entire day, his fast is not valid because he didn't have his intellect. But he has to make the day up, right? Because his intellect was not gone to the point of insanity. He just passed out. And he is still religiously responsible. And this is the consensus of the ulama. Number 3, sleeping. Now what does he mean? He means that if a person sleeps all day, is his fast still valid? He said, yes, it's still valid. And he does not have to make the day up. Okay? That time went by fast. Should we stop now and just pick up tomorrow?